Hello, everyone, and welcome. The 2023 Annular Eclipse is coming, and tonight's guest, Charles Fulco, is a first-rate authority on the subject. A graduate of the University of Buffalo, Charles has gained a formidable reputation as a science educator and NASA Solar System ambassador. His latest venture involves hosting the popular Science at Home podcast, which features many leading personalities in the astronomy field. Charles has also been a contributing science writer for Westchester Magazine. Let's all give Charles a big welcome back.
Wow, I'm impressed with myself. Thank you, that was really nice, Pat. And welcome to everybody here, and it's really nice auditorium, my first time here. And welcome to everybody online. It's kind of a formidable group tonight. We've got some top-notch physicians, a world-class diver, top-notch science people on Zoom, and really excited to be here. This eclipse is kind of comes as a 6-month preview to the big one on April 8th, 2024. So it's kind of gotten a little bit maybe under the radar for some people, because I think totality is the thing that's on most people's minds. But I love an annular eclipse too. I was privileged to see 2 of them in my life. I wish I'd seen more. One was in 2012 in Santa Fe, Albuquerque. And then I got to go with Dr. Jay Pasakoff and others, and Bet came with me as well, down to Facundo, South America in Patagonia, which was an astounding place to witness an annular eclipse. That was had a magnitude of about 98.5. So I was quite prepared to have some of the phenomenon associated with totality leading up to it. And it never really got really dim at all, actually. And I think some people would have maybe not even noticed anything was going on. But once you put the viewers up, you saw a beautiful, beautiful sight, a very, very thin annulus, very thin ring. So I wanted to talk about the viewing pleasures of seeing an annular eclipse. I'm going to have 2 friends tonight from the group here on Zoom. Give me a brief hand. Michael Zeiler from GreatAmericanEclipse.com and Dan McLawn from Eclipse2024.org. They're going to come on and talk briefly about some things associated with this and some of the things they're doing that help me out. So let's get started. And of course, working time all day. Oh, there we go. Okay. So how many people here in this room have seen an annular eclipse? Okay, good. Okay, great. So an annular eclipse acts much like other eclipses, total eclipses, partial eclipses, lunar eclipses. They belong to a family of eclipses called Saros, the Saros family. Saros is an ancient word. It means repeating, from the Greek, I believe. And people who first discovered this cycle back then, they came to the conclusion that eclipses will repeat themselves in similarity approximately every 18 years, 10 or 11 days, depending on the leap day, and 8 hours. And it's very cool because now I've been privileged to see Saros 136, which was probably the most famous eclipse cycle of the 20th century. That gave us the 1919 Eddington eclipse, which led to Einstein becoming an international celebrity several months later with his discovery that starlight can indeed be shifted by the sun's gravitation. And so that was in 1919. And then progressing to 1937, you had the 20th century's longest solar eclipse at over 7 minutes. And then 1955 and then 73, I caught up with it. Or actually, I didn't catch up with it. I was at the Hayden Museum that Saturday morning on June 30th, awaiting the live feed from Africa. A dust storm came up and took care of the feed. So I had to wait the next day to see it in the newspaper. And then 1991, I finally caught up with live in south of Mazatlan, Mexico, where I saw my first totality. It was 6 minutes, 52 seconds of pure, utter amazement. And in 1991, 2009, I was in Shanghai, and unfortunately, we got drenched out of that one. So looking forward to seeing the next one in 2027. So Saros family is a very cool tool to have because you can predict when the next one of this type will occur. So the last one that occurred in this family was on October 3rd of 2005. Again, it was an annular, and the difference though with 8 hours that I mentioned is that people will see it on the same day, but because in 8 hours, the world turns a third of the way on its axis. So people who saw it in one part of the world will miss out on it, and the rotation brings in a whole other part of the world to see it. So the 8 hours makes a difference in who will see this eclipse and compared to who saw it last time. And if you do 3 Saros cycles, that's 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, you come back to whence you began. So if you can go 54 years, you'll see a very similar eclipse in roughly the same longitude that you would have seen 54 years ago. And that's why I'm excited about the totality in 2024, because that takes me back to March 7th of 1970, when I saw my very first eclipse. It was 96% partial in New York. And had I known what totality was really like, I would have definitely hijacked the car, drove my mother's car at age 8.5 down to Virginia Beach or something and seen it. So again, once you see totality, you're totally hooked and you have to see it. But let's not sell annularity short, because that's beautiful in its own way, as I've been tested in South America, and those of you who have seen it. An annular eclipse is called an annular eclipse because of the annulus or ring that forms around the darkened new moon. And we're going to get to that later about why that happens. The magnitude of this eclipse will be about 96%, and that's the fraction of the angular diameter that's covered by the moon. In this case, 96% of the angular diameter will be obscured by the moon. The path width is approximately 187 kilometers across, and the max duration is 5 minutes 17 seconds, and the time of greatest eclipse will be about 6 o'clock GMT. So there's certain things that you always want to be aware of when you go see an eclipse before you start planning. You may want to see where the greatest eclipse will be. You may want to see where the weather prospects are best. You might want to see where there's going to be some fabulous terrestrial viewing done. So it's really important to know these things before you make your plans. So annular eclipses 101. On Saturday, October 14th, which is nice that it's a Saturday, a lot of people will be out of work and everything. A lot of people will have a chance to see this because it does take an entire swath of the US from Oregon all the way down to Texas. And it's very exciting. Texas is especially excited because 6 months later, they will get to see totality as well. So an annular is basically a really cool partial eclipse. The disk doesn't cover the entire breadth of the sun, as I've said. And that's because the moon does not orbit the Earth in a circle. It actually orbits the Earth, as many of you know, in an ellipse. And I lost my moon somehow, so I went and picked out a piece of rock outside to represent the moon. So I'm going to be greatly exaggerated here, but most people do think that planets and satellites orbit in circles, which would be equidistant at all times from the surface of the planet, of the larger object. But the moon actually orbits in an ellipse, as do the planets. And again, I'm greatly exaggerating here. So the moon would be at its farthest point in its orbit at its apogee, and its closest point would be its perigee. So when you hear about supermoons, that's all about the moon being in perigee and looking maybe 13, 14, 50% larger than it would at apogee. So when you see an annular eclipse, you're seeing the new moon at its close to its farthest point in its monthly orbit around the Earth. And I have to say, it was about halfway through both annulars that I saw, you could really tell just from the shape of the crescent that the moon was no way going to be large enough to cover the sun, which is kind of disappointing because you really want to see that last bit of sunlight go out. But again, as I'm going to talk about in a second, the annular eclipses have really, really nice Baily's beads displays, which are cool. So here's some example. The top one shows a solar eclipse, total solar eclipse, where the moon's umbra, which is the darkest part of the shadow. The shadow comprises the outer penumbra, which is the lighter part, and the inner darker part, which is the umbra. You can see in the top section that the cone does reach the surface of the Earth. As little as it does, it actually reaches. The annular eclipse, on the other hand, the moon being at its farthest close to it in its orbit, the apex of the umbra does not reach the Earth, and in fact, it forms what's called an antumbra, which is what will be under on October 14th, 2023, if you're fortunate enough to be in the path. Michael, I believe this is your illustration. I believe I meant to give credit, and I think I forgot to give credit here, but I believe this is from Great American Eclipse. And
Actually, it isn't, Charles.
Ernie's? It might be
Maybe,
Ernie Wright.
I'm not sure.
It was either yours or Ernie Wright. So Ernie Wright,
Yeah,
animator.
it could be.
Yeah, I think it's his. So Ernie Wright is an chief animator at Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, and he does some fantastic things too. So you can see it's kind of a different view. You're actually looking at the front of the face of the new moon with its comical umbra, which doesn't quite reach the Earth. So you have what's called an antumbra instead. This is from Michael's site, Great American Eclipse, showing the progression of an annular eclipse from beginning to the mid-eclipse, where you have, in this case, a very perfectly round annulus, which is what we saw from Albuquerque in May 20th, I believe, 2012. And it was really cool being on the center line because that annulus for a few seconds was right dead center. And that's when everybody's cameras kind of went off to make sure we got that. That was a lot of fun. Okay, now, one thing when you plan eclipses, I said, you want to make sure that you have a really, really cool week around it. I like to do a minimum of 1 week around an eclipse. When you go someplace really far away, like when I went to Shanghai, 2 weeks, Patagonia, 2 weeks, and you want to make sure that if you get rained out, that you're not completely depressed, because you want to have other things lined up that are really neat. So Michael's site, greatamericaneclipse.com, he listed several places that are really neat, some of them which I've never heard of. I did a little research on them, and I'm like, wow, these are really nice places to visit on their own, in their own right. But to have an annular eclipse take place over them is very special too. So I've been to places, I've been to Roswell, Alamo, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, but a lot of them, like I said, I really want to go to now, and having learned about their existence. Michael, if you could help me one more time, it was the stone tent monuments, I believe, right, that are close to you? Or tent trees, was it? There was we went on our way from Santa Fe to Albuquerque, we stopped there. So there's lots of really neat things you can do to make up your trip, make it really special with your family or your friends. And here's the extent of the partial, the annular plus the partial stage. You can see how wide, how truly wide the moon's penumbra is there. It takes in virtually the entirety of North America, all of Central America, and a nice chunk of South America. And you can see that why it's really important to make people aware of this around the country, in Canada and Mexico, because that virtually everybody will see at least a partial phase of this, whether or not they go to the track of annularity or totality 6 months from now. Most people in the US will see at least the partial stages. This is from Fred Espinak's site, Eclipse-wise. He's known in the trade as Mr. Eclipse because for years, decades, he did the Eclipse hard copies that I used to read, the bulletins that used to come before an eclipse. I would look forward to getting them, even though I wasn't going to see the totality. I would like to read up about it. And Fred does these wonderful diagrams here. And this is from Eclipse 2024, Dan McGlone, who has a fantastic page. I've worked with him on this with teacher diagrams and a lot of interactive diagrams, which is really nice. So this is another way to show the path of annularity. You can see very clearly that the blue line would be the center line, and the top line would be the northern limit. The bottom red line would be the southern limit. You have to be within those two extremes in order to see annularity. Same thing for totality as well. This is from Michael's site. You can see the elliptical shape of the antumbra on the Earth, how it's not close to being at its greatest extent here. But you can see as we go from the Oregon coast inland toward Texas, you can see how that really accentuated elliptical shape becomes more and more and more toward circular, which will be at the point of greatest eclipse. That's when if you drew a straight line from the Earth, from the moon's sun, moon, Earth, so the shadow would be most perfectly aligned with the center of the Earth. And this is from our friend Xavier Joubier, who's from France. he did a wonderful thing to Google Earth. He actually put eclipse paths on it. And anybody here ever use Google Earth to look at the eclipse paths? It's really, really worth checking out. I mean, and it's very interactive. You could actually zoom in. You could actually see within whether someone's backyard literally falls in the path of annularity or totality. So I love using this. It's really a fun tool. My students at middle school get a kick out of seeing if their their home or their friend's house will be in totality or annularity. This is Fred's site again. It talks about the local circumstances of an eclipse. In this case, we could go to Albuquerque, third one down, which does experience annularity. So you can see what time it begins at 9:34 local time. The sun's altitude will be 36 degrees, maximum eclipse at 9:36. It ends at 11:09, and the partial eclipse ends at 11:09. That means the whole eclipse is over then, and the eclipse duration is 4 minutes and change. So Fred had done these always has done these for many, many cities, whether or not they're in the path or not. Most of them, as you can see, don't have a annular or totality begins simply because they only get a partial event. What does an annular eclipse look like? The current cool, trendy, hip term is ring of fire. I know Jay doesn't like this, and I don't like it because though a lot of people say it's okay, but it makes it sound like the sun is on fire, which it certainly is not. The popular media now, they like to grab onto a term, whether it's a super duper strawberry worm moon, whether it's they have the Mars hoax was another famous event the media grabbed onto. If you go outside exactly at 12:34 a.m. on August 22nd, 2003, you'll see Mars look as big as a beach ball or whatever they said. I mean, it was ridiculous. So I have a problem with the media because they make it sound like it's an all or nothing event, and if you miss the 5 planets being aligned, if you didn't go out exactly that one time, you're going to miss it. So one thing, if I could have one wish as somebody who likes astronomy, is to have the media become a little more aware of things. And eclipses really frighten me because the media really gets it wrong with eclipses, as far as eye protection and everything. And one of our jobs, I love these guys too, because one of our jobs is to go around and correct the media all the time and try to do the damage they've done with knowledge and information. So terms notwithstanding, as I discovered in 2012, viewing this with Michael in Albuquerque, with Beth and my family, the annulus is very pretty. And what I did discover, though, that it really is the sun still peeking through, and at no point can you take off your eclipse glasses because you're still viewing a partial eclipse. So you really, really need to keep your solar viewers on at all times, or use a properly fitted telescope, which is what I did. And I had my Coronado PST with me. And that was, I think, my favorite, because you could actually track the Bailey's beads in H alpha light, which is really cool. Anybody have any solar scopes, PST or anything? Okay, yeah, so that was fun. Visible light was fun too, because you could see the Bailey's beads in visible light on the other scope too. So what's going to happen during an ASC? Well, the sky and land won't get as dim as during a total solar eclipse. You won't see the solar corona unless you use special techniques. One of our colleagues, Daniel Fisher, did a great job in a few years ago with an annular eclipse, where he was able to block out a lot of the direct light, and he actually glimpsed the corona for briefly during annularity, which was very cool. You won't see the diamond ring effect. You won't see stars appear. You may see Venus and Jupiter, depending on how, to the extent of annularity, how much of the sun is covered. And in fact, if you didn't know, you may not even notice anything unusual was going on, which was the case with Facundo. Really did not. I mean, I guess your eyes do a really good job of adjusting themselves to the encroaching dimness. I won't say darkness, but dimness. So I think that's a big part of it. Our eyes do a really good job of adapting. If you were to take me out of, say, an inside room and then brought me out maybe 20 minutes after, 20, maybe 10 minutes before annularity began, oh wow, it is dim. But just standing outside, you get accustomed to the dimness, and it was maybe a little bit dimmer, but not much. I didn't see any, because we were in an astoundingly bare area, as Jay can attest. No trees, scrub, lots of flatness. We really didn't see any shadows from trees. You didn't see crescents from trees. And I just have one funny thing to say about this. Fred Esquinak, who I rely on a lot for his information, Mr. Eclipse, he is famous for cordoning himself off and making sure nobody's around him, doing his own thing. He comes out with spectacular images. If he's at a beach, he uses the ocean as one of his perimeters, so nobody can be in front of him. And I to this day, he disappeared in Facundo. I don't know where he went, but it was flat, no trees, scrub, and this man disappeared and came back from wherever he was with beautiful, beautiful images. So it's kind of cool seeing it from the relative lushness of Albuquerque with this Sangre de Cristo's mountains in the background, just seeing it from Facundo, where there was hardly anything but flatness. You will see Bailey's beads. And in fact, my favorite Bailey's beads that I've ever observed were with the 2012, and I believe Facundo also had some nice Bailey's beads. Bailey's beads are caused by the lunar surface, the lunar limb not being perfectly, smooth. The lunar surface has mountains just like Mars and the Earth does, and Venus and Mercury. And what happens is, as the lunar limb approaches, becomes almost tangent with the sun's disk, the lunar mountains will come into effect, and they'll break up sunlight, whereas only allowing sunlight to show through the lunar valleys. And the extent of the Bailey's beads really was special. I was not expecting that. And there are people who go strictly to the northern limit or the southern limit to see extended Bailey's beads as they wrap around the crescent of the surface of the sun as the moon wraps around it. And I'm very tempted to go to the edge to see an annular eclipse, just to see that phenomenon. So this is what I was talking about. Michael, I believe you said you're going to be at the ski resort, which is kind of close to the northern edge of annularity. I think you're muted, Michael. Oh, he's muted. Anyway.
Okay, all right. You can hear me now.
Yeah, you're going to be toward the northern edge, right?
Yeah, our local ski area it is going to be my preferred location because it's right on the northern limit. So we'll have an spectacular extended view of Bailey's beads. For a brand new person seeing an annular eclipse, I would go for the center line to see. You have to see the perfect annulus.
I agree.
But after you've seen several annular eclipses, go to the limits and see the spectacular vision of the Bailey's beads. So that's what I'm going to do.
I agree. After seeing the extended beads, I was like, wow, this is really, really, really cool. I'll still be a greedy for total eclipses, though. I'll still
and Charles, it's important to be prepared for that view because the ideal way to watch the Bailey's beads is with binoculars, but with binoculars very securely fitted with solar filters. And you can order these, but you don't want to wait until the last minute because they're going to run out. So you want to get your binocular filters, get them fitted. I'm paranoid about filters, so I always put some tape to make them absolutely secure on the binoculars. But that's the best way to view an annular eclipse.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Hey, sorry, Charles, can I just stick something in real quick?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
One of the things, and this is kind of a in the trenches type of thing, if you do put filters, when you put the filters on your binoculars or your scopes or your cameras, I also tape a piece of string to the filter, and I also tape that to the body of the camera or the lens or the binocs. That way, when I need to take them off at totality, if I'm in a total eclipse, I can just flick them off and they'll hang there and I won't lose them. That doesn't apply to an annular eclipse, but for totality, it's one trick.
That's a great deal. Like my Nikon lens caps have that. I can't believe the little thing on them. That's very cool, Dan. I think.
Yeah, and it's even cheaper than Amazon, $5 or so. They sell them, but you can just make one with some tape and some string, and it's pretty much free.
This is why I hang around these guys. I pick up good tips every now and then. If you want to go to the center line, as Michael said, you'll see a perfectly circular annulus for a few seconds. As the moon, don't forget the moon constantly moves on, so it won't last forever, but you will see it. And I got about 30 shots within about 30 seconds of that, and it's really nice to see that. But I think I'll from now on I would probably go toward the limits instead. Okay, why go to a certain area?
Is this Bailey actually discovered beads that we give his name at an annular eclipse.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, good. Do you know which one, what approximately what year that was, Jay?
I think it was around 1820, but I'm not
Oh, so,
completely
yeah,
sure.
Very,
Exactly.
very, I didn't know that. So the old adage, climate is what you expect, but weather is what you get. That was certainly true for me in a positive way in 2010, when I went down to the very bottom of the world to see to Calafate, to see the 2011 total eclipse of the sun. Nobody gave me any shot in anything to see it, because for that time of year down there in midwinter, the clouds just roll in. And the day of the eclipse, I had people, natives in El Calafate, tell me that was the clearest day in 10 years or so. So that adage really is true. You can plan. You can go to what you think is going to be a really good spot. You get clouded out, as happened to many. The names of Jay's here, but it happened to many in Kona, in Hawaii, where they were clouded out unexpectedly. And then for me, it was the opposite. I really wasn't expecting to see it, but I said, you know what? I got cheap airfare, never been to South America, let me give it a try. And I had a beautiful sunset eclipse. The sun was about a degree above the Andes, just as totality ended. So again, picking your spot, you might want to be standing with your feet in the Pacific Ocean or by the Oregon shore. Be the first person in the country to see annularity. You might want to be in the mountains, like people went to the Utah and in the Wyoming to see totality, to see the umbra, clearer view of the umbra coming at them. Again, though, as you move from west to east, the sun's altitude will increase or decrease depending on what time of day. The azimuth, the direction of the sun along the horizon, will change, and so your local circumstances, you have to be very careful to make sure that you're timing. Like for instance, again, to bring up El Calafate, a group from Europe were there to see it, and they didn't do their research like we did. They didn't position themselves high enough on this hill we were on, and just as second contact occurred, just as totality was beginning, the Andes took over and blocked the view, and they didn't know what they were missing. They were cheering. It's actually on YouTube. I can't even watch it. They're cheering and like, oh my goodness. And then when they saw what our video looked like, what they realized they missed, they were ready to hang the tour director. So
Joe's raised his hand.
oh, sorry. Good. Who's got his hand raised?
I don't know who.
Oh, Joe Radio. Hey, Joe. I didn't even see you there. Joe Radio, ladies and gentlemen, our local boy.
Hey,
I
Joe.
didn't get into it. Hi, folks. I didn't do anything. I didn't raise my hand or anything. I'm just sitting here listening to listening to the talk. So
I was thinking,
Oh,
of you, Joe.
but
because
Joe-
you're the last person I spoke with the night before El Calafate. You told me I was going to see it. I remember that very well.
And Charles, we have to hear Joe say his famous line. You had no right to see
Oh,
that
yes.
eclipse.
You know, right. He told me that for the past 11 years. I had no right to see that eclipse. And he was right. Good to see you.
I
Joe.
went down to Antarctica on a cruise this past December. I had beautifully clear weather the 2 days before the eclipse, the afternoon of the eclipse, and for many days afterwards. But on the morning of the eclipse at 4 a.m., when we were all out, and about looking skyward, we saw zilch. It was just like it was my very first eclipse. I've traveled to 13 totalities. It was my very first one where I didn't see anything of the sun from start to finish.
Oh, yeah.
And all I got was 96 seconds of as if somebody was turning a rheostat down in the darkness and then bringing it back up again. That was my view of the December 4th total eclipse. But it was a nice cruise anyway.
So the captain couldn't fiddle enough, right? Like in 1999.
Well, unfortunately, we saw the bad weather coming and heading in our direction. I mean, the day before, I must tell you, there was blue sky and brilliant sunshine. I'm saying to myself, my God, are we actually going to pull off a miracle? But the cloud cover that was advancing toward us was very rapid, and there's just no way. We actually tried working our way all the way north to get out of the clouds and even get some thin spots. Out of 17 cruise ships, I think there was only one that saw it, and that one was right at the sunrise point, the least possible area that you would expect to get any clear weather with the sun literally sitting on the horizon. They saw it, and the rest of us didn't.
I think somebody here next to you on the screen has, I saw that. I think Michael saw that, right? I believe.
And incidentally, before at the end of your talk, Charles, I do have a most interesting. You were talking about the showing the wonderful maps by Mike and some of the others of this particular eclipse coming up. But I found a map from 1969, the Exiglimos, the Triple Saros, going all the way back to September of '69 of this annular eclipse in sky and telescope. So maybe at the end of the talk, if I get a chance, give me sharing capabilities and I'll share with all of you and show you how Sky and Telescope covered that event in 1969. Partial across much of the United States, large partial in southwestern U.S., nothing up here in the Northeast. We were outside of the zone of the partial
I
eclipse.
wouldn't remember that. I don't remember that, seeing that. Yeah, the Exelimos, as I hope I pronounced it correctly, is when you have the triple Saros. You have 18 years, 11 days, plus 18 years, 11 days, and it adds up to 54 years. And that's why I was talking about the March 7th, 1970 eclipse, which was my first one that I saw. It's coming around again now, April 8th, 2024. So it's kind of cool to see that have made three Saros in my lifetime. Why go to a certain city or historic site? I love doing this. I've been to 4 continents to see total eclipses, and each continent has brought with it different wonderful man-made or natural phenomena to see. And I like to plan the trip, and if you go with a professional tour, they will, plan a really nice trip around the eclipse and kind of save the eclipse for maybe sort of toward the tail end to give it a nice kind of climactic finish to your trip and everything. And of course, you have the party the night of the eclipse, and it just I've never been to New Mexico in 2012, and I was astounded by the beauty of New Mexico, and again of the sparseness of Patagonia and of the mountains in Austria, and it's lovely to plan a whole trip around historic sites or buildings, architectural wonders, things like that.
Charles, could I say one thing about your
Yeah.
slide?
Of course.
You say that you want to make sure you have a memorable trip, and you don't want the reason that you didn't see the eclipse to be the reason that your trip was memorable.
That is true. That is very true. You want a memory and a good. Well, that's why I tell people, make sure you do lots of cool things. Like in Shanghai, I've never been to China before, and I had a great time. I got chased by a police officer. That was a whole other story, but other I had a very interesting time.
We told you to stop that, Charles.
I know. I was doing my New York jaywalking, and he didn't like that. So make sure you plan a lot of cool things. So when we did get drenched out of it. Literally, it was some of the hardest rain I've ever experienced, but it's also the darkest dark I've ever experienced on the eclipse. It was very interesting. So consult websites, atlases, books, magazines. I'm going to show you a few examples coming up here. Michael Zeiler and
Before you go on, can I say that I rely on the eclipsophile.com site of Jay Anderson, who looks at satellite maps for around 20 or 25 years to look for the cloudiness.
yeah,
So I look at the statistics that Jay Anderson finds for the cloudiness, and that's why I want to go to Mazatlan in 2028.
yeah.
Total, of course, and he's got great predictions for Albuquerque for the eclipse you're talking about now.
That's
And,
good. Yeah.
and let me make sure you had the date right for when you were in Calafate. It was July 11th, 2010.
Oh, 2010. Okay.
It was 2010. I was in Easter Island.
I got the 11 of the date mixed up with the 11.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you. So these are two. This is a field guide which I've been using very much these days. Michael Zeiler and Michael Bakish, who still, I believe, works in some capacity for Astronomy Magazine. They put together this splendid field guide to both eclipses, and then Michael also put together the Atlas of Solar Eclipses, which is a beautiful coffee table book with really glossy pages and very nice prose and language and just it's a wonderful thing to keep on your coffee table. And good job on those, Michael. Very, very nice.
Thank you.
And Michael also did a globe for the
Yes.
Australian telescope for all the eclipse paths for 100 years.
Yes.
Yep.
12-inch globe.
I'm gonna keep that for the next 100 years so I can go around and I'm waiting for 2079. That's gonna be over Portchester, my hometown. That'll be cool. So whether or not to choose a particular location, and as Jay was just saying about Jay Anderson, Jay is a wonderful Canadian meteorologist, he's top notch in his field, and eclipsophile.com has a wonderful, as Jay was saying, wonderful graphics and very easy to understand diagrams and such. And what I'm taking this right off his Eclipsophile. October is a friendly month, and much of the American part of the track offers very promising prospects of sunny skies on eclipse day. There's only when the track reaches the Yucatan Peninsula, and beyond that, cloudy skies become a significant threat. So if Jay says it's going to be good, I put a lot of faith in him. And Jay also have done recently Peterson Field Guide to was it Jay? Is it to weather and astronomy? When you worked with him?
We, no, but Jay Anderson and I have a new Peterson Field Guide to Weather.
Weather, okay. I knew it was either astronomy or weather. This is what Jay is talking about.
And they're both listed on my book website at solarcorona.com.
Very cool. I'm going to add that to add that to my links here. Okay, so also I was mentioning tours. There's plenty of tours out. I believe the first tour I ever heard, and Joe Rayo could back me up on this, was I believe in '72, the Fair Sea and the Fair Wind were the first two ships to actually be dedicated eclipse ships, and they saw the July 10th, 1972 eclipse from the North Atlantic. And since then, it's really taken off. It's a whole, massive industry right now. And if you notice on the bottom, they even have senior trips to see the eclipse, and it's just wonderful. And I spend now time looking at these to get good price points to see, so if I want to make my choice, I'm going on my own. What can I do? What would I be missing? Is it better to go with these people who really know the area? And lots of times it is better to go with people who, are familiar, they can speak the language, things like that. Here's some various images I've taken. The top one right there with the nearly circular annulus. That's one from 2012. I like to take annular eclipses through clouds. It just looks very interesting. The same thing with that, the sickle sun that rose last June, 2 Junes ago, which we got clouded out in Rehoboth Beach. But I understand up here it was visible, right? I believe. Yeah, got clouded out the last minute. Annular can be a very cool thing to photograph too. As always, though, as Dan was saying, and Michael, just keep those filters on, because at no time is it safe to look at an annular eclipse without eye protection. Before I say goodbye, though, I wanted Michael and Dan were going to come on. Michael, you wanted to talk about the feelings people get about eclipses, or tell me again what you were going to talk about.
The feelings that people get during eclipses, it's an intensely emotional experience. And if you've never seen one before, you can't possibly prepare yourself for that experience. An annular eclipse is not as dramatic, but it's still a very striking sight, provided that you have the right filtration. The rule of thumb, I think, and some may disagree, I think Jay will disagree, but my rule of thumb is for a partial eclipse, I'll go in my backyard. For an annular eclipse, I'll go somewhere in my continent. For a total solar eclipse, I'll go anywhere in the world that I can get to with a plane. So that's how I feel about it.
Well, Michael knows I'm willing to travel further for all those possibilities. But at a meeting of the AAS, American Astronomical Society Task Force on Eclipses last week, I got worried that people who live near the path of annularity may see annularity and they won't be so impressed, because after all, it's just a partial eclipse of 95 or 98% or whatever. And so I was trying to get the task force to define, and I hope you people all contribute to that, of really making the distinction between an annular eclipse in annularity and a total eclipse, and that it's worth traveling to be in the path of totality, which I know Michael agrees with, for anywhere in the country, certainly. But if the people have seen an annular eclipse the year before, they may not be inclined to go out of the way to see the total eclipse, and they'll be missing a lot.
A couple of other data points for that is that inside the path of the 2023 eclipse, there are 6.6 million people that live inside that path. For the 2024 eclipse, which is the total eclipse, 31.6 million people, nearly 5 times as many people will see totality compared to annularity. So that's, it's a reflection of the annular path going through the desert Southwest.
That's great. Michael, what was your opinion of the 2012 eclipse that you and I saw together from Albuquerque? That wasn't your first annular, was it?
It was my first successful annular. I tried to see an annular eclipse on January 4th, 1992 in California, but got clouded out. So it was it was my second successful annular, because there was another annular eclipse. I forget exactly when it was, but it was roughly 2010 or so. So this was my third annular eclipse, and the coming one will be my fourth annular eclipse. They're very worth seeing. I really like the magnified view with filters. That's very dramatic. Also, after I saw some photographs of sunrise annulars, that became a new bucket list item for me. So I'm going to travel throughout the world to try and see a sunrise or sunset annular, because the effect of the refraction, if you have a clear horizon, is just astounding on the perfect annulus.
That's great. Yeah,
Michael, I did see the 2012 eclipse. The sun was eclipsed as it was setting, and you are right. It was absolutely one of the most stunning things I ever saw in my life.
Dan, pics or it didn't happen?
And we saw it as a shark fin setting over Albuquerque.
We saw that.
That was really.
Oh, okay. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. It was awesome.
That was really nice. And thank you, Michael. And then Dan, we have time for you to say a few things also. So,
what would you like to talk about?
Talk about, like, Dan's got a fantastic site that is also interactive, because teachers and lay people can use it, because it has very nicely put diagrams and interactive diagrams that are really good in the classroom. But for this eclipse, Dan, your video, explain your videos that are select for each selected city. That's probably one of the most.
Well, we have the Eclipse Simulator, which I'm pretty sure most of the people in the audience have seen. If not, we can, I'm happy to do a presentation and show it. It does show what the eclipse will look like from any location. We do our own eclipse calculations and show that. And we've extracted from that simulator about 2,500 videos in English, an equal number in Spanish, and some in French for Canadians, that are on YouTube. You don't even have to do anything. Just go search for them on YouTube and you'll find them. 2023 eclipse, pick a city, and they're there.
Sure. If you could get one ready, I'm just going to take Q&A. If you could get one ready.
What city would you like to see?
You want to stay local and do Pleasantville, New York, or you want to go someplace? Want to see? Is this for 2024?
23. I thought we would look at.
Yeah. Okay, you have one. Okay, I wasn't sure if you have one for that. I don't know. What's? Give me a city.
On the path.
Yeah, on the path. Let's do one on the path.
Farmington, New Mexico.
Farmington, New Mexico. Not to make you use it.
Is that where you're going?
No, but I think it's on the path. I know that Medicine Hat, Utah is on the path.
I don't know if I have one for Medicine Hat. I do have Bullfrog, Utah.
Bullfrog.
Yeah. Stop, skip the job.
Farmington is actually not, it's about halfway between the center line and the edge. If Albuquerque is fantastic, it's like right on the center line.
All right, so
Dan, I
do
got
that
yours.
one.
Oh, hold on, I just want to show them, I want to show the folks your, 1 second. All right, go ahead. Is yours queued up?
I'm sorry, that was a question. Do you want to see the video or the simulator? I'm sorry to waste time on it.
Let's do the simulator.
Okay, I'll open that up and
Yeah,
I'll
go for it.
need to share my screen. Have you given me the ability to share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think now you're seeing the simulator that I've pulled up. That doesn't look at all like New Mexico. We'll just go into for the sun and we'll just move the time slider and you can see that the moon covers. And then let's see if we can see any
Very cool.
any beads there. We do. We incorporate the LRO data so that we're using the actual beads. And if you look, you can see what Charles was talking about earlier, that it's kind of hard to tell when the sun and moon aren't together, but as they come together, and this goes back to if you take somebody out in the backyard and look at the moon, it's very hard to tell just looking at the moon that it is smaller or larger than the sun, but nowhere is this shown more clearly than during an annular eclipse.
And you just said the LRO data. So let me explain that that's the Lunar Reconnaissance Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. And Ernie Wright, who I think may have been mentioned, is on the visualization team for that. But that's 3D mapping by a NASA spacecraft of the shape of the moon, and therefore, I'm very impressed, Dan, that you have the actual mountains on the moon and the 3D altitudes so that you can model not only annularity, but also the Bailey's Beast. That's very.
Yeah, you can't be scared of math if you're going to do that. But we do a lot of that math, and in the total in the simulator for the total eclipse, you can really see that very, very starkly as totality approaches. And now this time, let me just show that. It's pretty obvious here that the moon appears to be larger than the sun, and that's just basically the geometry of the distance between the Earth and the moon and the sun. Nothing more than that. Let me turn that off, and we'll see some beads here, and then we will give it back to Charles. So here you can see we've got chromosphere, we've got some corona, we've got a prominence, and we've got the beads here, which if I turn off the corona, you can really get a good view of how the beads grow and change, even in real time. So if I start the clock and run the clock in real time, you can see that it's a phenomenon that you can actually see with your filters on, with the naked eye, and then turn the corona on, and you can see we got two prominences. Look at that. Anyway, that's what we've done for the totality and annularity.
You promise us two prominences, Dan?
No,
That's how good his math is.
where's the disclaimer? How do I pull that up again? Hang on.
Yeah, you better get that lawyer working on that.
You know, we have a library of prominences that the simulator randomly selects from, and then it statistically moves them. It favors locations on the solar equator, which is what they do. But I'll tell you, this is the first time I've publicly said this. We're working on getting the 2017 eclipse into the simulator here. And when we do, we will use the actual corona and the actual prominences as they were for that eclipse.
Thank you very much, Dan. Very cool. I hope people will explore that.
Very nice job, Dan. Congratulations.
Very much. All right. So I'm going to just say, any questions here?
And
If
it's online, you can either raise your hand or just speak up. don't forget to go to Joe's thing.
Yeah, if I can get the sharing capabilities, I want to show you that sky and telescope
Oh, yeah.
coverage of the.
Stuff, but yeah, Joe, go for that. Do that.
Are you gonna get out?
Yeah, I'm sharing. Go for it.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to share that right now, and you can take a look at it. This, I'm going to blow it up a little bit so it's a better view. Okay, this is page 161 from the September 1969 edition of Sky and Telescope. This is the Triple Saros.
Can you make it larger?
I could try to.
I can barely see it. Oh, there we go. No, it's okay. It's okay. I looked at my other computer. You're good. You're good.
Okay, so you can see 54 years and 1 month ago, or 54 years and 1 month from October of 2023 in September. This was the 11th of September, 1969, and there's the annular eclipse track, which is a bit to the south and west of where the track is in 2023. But there you see how it's aligned relative to North and South America. This is, of course, the zone of partial eclipse. Here in the Northeast, we saw nothing. We didn't have any view of the partial eclipse. And in fact, if you went to Chicago, I think the partial eclipse lasted all of 1 hour, and there was about 5%. The magnitude was about 5% in the Windy City. It got a little bit more as you went down toward Miami, but the folks who were in the central and southern end of California, actually most of California, got to see a pretty good partial eclipse, about 70 to 75% magnitude, and that was enough to cause the sky to slightly dim. And Sky and Tel, in their coverage of this eclipse, a couple of months later in the November issue of Sky and Tel, they pointed out that this was pretty much a dress rehearsal from much of the United States for the main event, the one that will occur or occurred 6 months later in March of 1970. So that's how, and notice, if you will, that the U.S. Naval Observatory, they don't do this anymore. They produced a very interesting partial and annular eclipse map, which showed semi-durations. The contours were in semi-durations. In other words, for right about here, I believe they gave you a semi-duration of 100 minutes. So if, for example, you were located along the west coast of Mexico, you would see the beginning of the partial phase of the eclipse begin 100 minutes before and last for 100 minutes after mid or maximum eclipse. That was the easy way, I guess, in case you didn't have local circumstances specifically calculated for your site. And they don't do this anymore. I think it's more difficult for the Michael maybe. I know
Michael could do it.
Well, I know he did. He did.
Michael does something similar with his isochrons, but he could do this.
Yeah, it's trivial to do this, and I made one of those and shared it with you, Joe, a few years ago.
I remember that. I remember that.
I'll make another one for 2024.
Michael's definition of trivial is different than mine, I think.
Well, the hard work is done, and Dan, you were saying earlier about how so much math is involved. Well, you know, for the work that I produce, it's so much computations, geographic computations. When I produce eclipse maps for a particular eclipse, it takes about a week solid of the PC running just computations 24/7 before I get something I can really work with.
Right. I have about 7 laptops that I run 24 hours a day whenever I add an eclipse to the simulator. That's how long for about 3 weeks. And it takes that long to crunch all the numbers.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
I think we really ought to owe a debt of gratitude to people like Jean Meus, for example, who I think got most of us started on this with his algorithms and his calculating books back about 30, 40 years ago. And in fact, I remember as a 16-year-old, my mom gave me what I still consider to be one of my greatest Christmas gifts, and that was the Canon of Eclipses, Canon of Solar Eclipses, that was written by Meus and 2 of his colleagues, Van der Leen and I forget the third gentleman. And I got that book at the same time that I got my first Casio calculator. And I spent much of, there it is. I see Mike there with his copy there. And I spent most of Christmas Day of 1972 just sitting there doing the calculation for the 2024 eclipse. Actually, I wanted to see just how much we would see here in the New York metropolitan area. It took me about 8 or 9 hours to do all of the number crunching or whatever, but finally was able to do that. And I still consider that, as I said, one of the best Christmas gifts that I've ever had from my mom, who is still with us and will actually turn 90 in October. So,
Congratulations.
so fantastic.
Thank you guys so much for tonight for helping me out. I really appreciate it. And let's get together soon under the moon's shadow someplace.
Thank you for all the outreach work that you do, Charles. It's great work.
Thanks so much. Good night, guys.
Great presentation.
Any other questions?
Will there be a lot of sun activity in 2023? A lot of prominence, a lot of sunspots and a lot of storms on the sun at that time?
There's a lot now, and there will be.
Okay.
I just wanted to do a shout out for Charles. Thank you so much for making the pandemic bearable. Your science at home days and watching them again were really good.
Thank you. Appreciate
Even
that.
the one with Larry.
I'll
Larry,
have to start over again. I took a hiatus because school was so tough. I had no time.
no, I can't imagine. They're still archived, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Charles, can you throw up that slide again of good locations? Was that early in your presentation?
The ones that Michael had on his site, yeah, let me see if I can, I'm hitting the arrow, nothing's happening. Hold on, let me stop sharing for a second.
It was the one with the Alamo picture on it.
Yeah, I think that one, yeah.
Let me stop sharing and now let me try it now, hold on. Okay, I'm going back. And I'll share in 1 second as soon as I get to it.
The surgeon operates at his table. The intensity is so thick.
Okay.
He moves in for the kill.
Here we go. Here we go.
Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, that one, great.
That's a great list. That's awesome.
Thank you, Michael. I got it off of Great American Eclipse.
Yeah, there's a map that I did that showed every single national park. That's a partial list. That's about half of the parks that are inside the path.
Hey, don't forget, if you go to Recife, Brazil, on the coast, you can see this one at sunset.
Yep,
So
if it's clear.
Oh, do we have time for one? Do we have time for one last quick anecdote here? Because we were talking about annulars versus totals. And back in 2006, I flew out of London to Turkey for a total eclipse of the sun that occurred on I believe, March 29th of 2006. And I was on board an L-1011 jet that was jam-packed with Brits, 350 people on board that plane. And on that flight, I was wearing my eclipse hat. John Beatty, who many of you may know, used to create badges for specific eclipses of the sun. I had a whole bunch of them, all the ones that I had seen, all the totalities I had seen on a baseball cap. And a gentleman came up to my seat and said, "Excuse me, mate." And by the way, they really do talk like that if you go to the UK. I said, "Yes, sir. What would you like to know?" He said, I noticed your hat. You've been to the total eclipses before? And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, about 6 months ago, I went to Madrid where they had a Ring of Fire eclipse. And indeed, in October of 2005, there was an annular eclipse that passed right over Madrid. cut right through Spain. And this gentleman, this British gentleman, said, "I was there for that eclipse. Now I'd like to ask you a question. What we're going to see tomorrow in Turkey, will it be about as good as what I saw in Madrid?" And I looked at this gentleman, I laughed in his face, and I said, "Mister, you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing." I said, wait till tomorrow." He said, "Really?" He said, "Well, I thought that the eclipse in Madrid was quite spectacular. It was a ripping good show." And I said, "Look, we're all going to be on this flight going back to London." He said, "After tomorrow, when you see the eclipse, come back to my seat and you tell me what you thought and how it stacked up against what you saw in Madrid." Well, sure enough, we had a beautiful view from Turkey of this of totality. It almost was like an annular eclipse because the inner corona was so dazzlingly bright, and it was a spectacular. It was 3 minutes and I think 50 seconds of totality. And we're back on the plane. We're heading back to London. Here comes my friend coming back up to me, a little sheepish, and I said, "So, what do you think? How'd you like today's eclipse versus the one you saw 6 months ago?" And he said, "Well, the Ring of Fire eclipse was cute as compared to the total eclipse." So he learned very quickly the difference between an annular eclipse and a total eclipse on that flight.
That's all you need to know. That's great. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thank you. So we're heading over to Applebee's. Everybody's welcome to come if you don't know how to get there and follow somebody. And we will see you.
And the people on the internet,
Yeah, they can come too.
That sounds great, but it's a long drive.
you're spared.
Spared.
You're spared, Apple.
Yeah, I'll see you in a couple of days. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joe, for all the added material, and Jay, it was great. Thank you, Charles. And I love your idea of doing something, outreach, and I'll certainly help if we do that.
That sounds great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
go on.
Bye-bye. Good weekend, everyone.